Can I
yes.
just come in here just
we
briefly?
We need an expert, so don't ask me.
One concern I had about watching the Test series was that I actually felt Christian Wolff did have a point about the ruck speed. I felt the rucks were untidy. And I think it's an area that Super League can do better at. The problem that we've had, and we've discussed it on here before, is that when we have supposed clampdowns is that 6-7 weeks in, we suddenly backtrack as a group of referees because the heats come on. So I think, and I don't know what the stats are because I don't have access to the stats to compare the NRL versus the Super League, but in my view, the play of the ball is far scruffier and makes it a far more challenging competition to officiate the ruck than the NRL is my view, and I think that would help. Giving the backing to the referees to tidy the ruck up would help them, but I think would help the look of the sport and would help England internationally, because the last few major competitions, international competitions, have actually been refereed by NRL referees who probably referee the ruck slightly differently. And I appreciate you don't referee in the same way you do it in domestic competition that you do as in an international competition, but has there been any discussion off the back of the Test series around the ruck and potentially how we tidy up? I mean,
so I'm not involved in the referees department to some extent. I'm part of a senior management team that oversees officiating, so I'm not going to pretend it's not on our agenda. Ultimately, Dave Elliott is in interim charge of that department and has managed the department through 12 months. Dave Rotherham's is direct report and in charge of that area. But I do some reviewing of officials, and so how do I put this in the easiest possible way? I think there's a number of issues that face match officials in this country. Firstly, I don't think the game really knows what it wants, and I mean the whole game. That's fans, CEOs, executives, players, coaches. I think secondly, and not criticising the players that play over here, but they aren't at the same standard as some of the NRL players, and people comparing the NRL Grand Final or Origin with some of our games is frankly just off the page. Because a lot of the standard of play is created by players and coaches. It's not created by match officials. But do match officials have an important part to play in that? I think they do. I felt it for 3 years actually, that I felt we've allowed creep in the ruck area. And it probably came about the back end of my last full-time year, really, where we just started to let things go. So we used to have there was a period, and I remember doing it. I put David Fafita in the bin at Magic because of ruck infringements. But last year we had one person went to the bin for ruck infringements.
Well, we mentioned that on the podcast, and I couldn't remember a single incident when somebody's gone to the bin off repeated infringements.
It happened once on Salford and Warrington, and if you remember, if you go back and watch the game and you're a rugby league nerd or you're a rugby league referee, you'd go, he didn't pick the right one and he put a player in the bin. It was actually a surrender and he came up on the ball, and if he'd have called surrender he'd have got away with it. So that
cannot be right. You cannot have 27 rounds
precisely. Games so I think what's happened is, over a period of time, the ruck has become increasingly challenging. And I don't just label that at the current crop of referees. I think you and I were involved in that creep in the last 18 months of our careers. And what used to happen was, we used to get it right at the beginning of the year, do the hard yards. We did used to back off, but actually players did start to buy in as well. And then you just used to have to give reminders as the season wore on. And my final point on it would be, and this isn't bigging up James or I, we were good referees, but I'm not saying we were world's best referees, but when we both departed, you took away the best part of probably 1,500 games of first grade experience and 600 games of Super League experience, more than 600 games. So that's a big chunk, when you look at the most experienced referee, bar Ben Thaler now, is Chris Kendall, and he's not at 200, and then you have 5 or 6 who aren't even at 100. It's hard to get to that level. Was there a reflection off Tonga? I don't think it was necessarily off Tonga. We had a meeting with the coaches last week. We've got board this week. I think the game's at an inflection point, and I think it's got to change for a number of reasons. And I think one of those around brain health is, if you actually just, for example, get players to stand on the mark and play the ball with the foot, you add about 0.4 to the play the ball. If you add that up over a game, that's probably about 4 play the balls less over a game, which is 4 times less for someone to have potentially been hit in the head. So it's an easy win for brain health. It's 4 less tackles, And I think it cleans a lot of the ruck up. For me,
are
an issue.
Are you getting the buy-in?
So
I know you're not going to go into detail in terms of how those meetings go, but is there a consensus that in these areas, clubs, at the coaches,
I think the coaches and the refs and the game feels that the ruck needs to be better next year. Now, we've got a bit of work to do to make sure we've got full buy-in, because I think our other criticism would always be we used to roll this out in February, and in round 1 of Super League it used to be a mess. I think we should be rolling that out this week. Clubs should know where they stand, and on the back of that saying, don't come moaning at us in February because we told you what this was in.
And hopefully there's plenty of club visits for referees to go in and referee some of those trial games.
The operation of this is going to be very big, but we've not quite got it all nailed off yet, but I think we'll get there. The game has to be better next year. Oh, it has to be better.
Just on discipline, sorry Phil. Last week, fines handed out to Jason Hurst of Bradford, Paul King of Salford, Stuart Middleton of Warrington Wolves, David Beaumont of Lee, and Oliver Gildart, a player, for their comments to the general public at large about refereeing decisions, match officials in general.
Match review panel.
Yeah.
Do we go far enough with those sanctions? Because we've mentioned on this programme plenty of times, clubs during matches tweeting their disdain about referee. I know that it's a club Twitter, it's not an individual person, but I mean, I've said to you, James, and you said, you shouldn't be beyond criticism, but there's a line, isn't there? And there's openly, we saw in football the other week with Mikel Arteta having to go at the referee, and that just opens the floodgates for anyone to just criticise and say whatever they want.
I think it's difficult. It's a challenge for the RFL before I answer that, Robert. Is that I've seen lots of other examples of lots of other players criticising match officials during games, and that then it becomes difficult. Well, if he's doing it, why can't I do it? And
the challenge is we don't communicate every fine that we do, because if all you ever did was tweet fines or put press release out about the fines for players, well, the game would just say, all you do is fine people, you don't respond to it.
Great Christmas party.
Exactly.
Plenty of those.
We'll be having lobster and champagne next week. Yeah, that was what that was about. I don't think the fine should be. I don't think the fine should be increased. Partly because I don't think the sport's got that much money, and I think those fines are significant for those people. I'd much prefer a situation where I think fines come about through frustration. And they come about because people don't feel they're being listened to, or because they don't know where to go to be listened to. And with all of those people, probably with the exception of one being the player, I think they all realised if they'd have just picked the phone up, they could have had a conversation and they might not have got anywhere. And don't forget, sometimes they do it because it's a way of deflecting away from something else.
Well, we talked about the Stuart Middleton one. I know you're not going to name examples, but it's a conscious decision to write a letter and a conscious decision to publish that letter, as opposed to standing up with a microphone and losing your cool and saying things that you think, oh, hang on a minute, I wish I'd probably not said that or whatever. On reflection, that takes a conscious decision to do that, and I questioned it at the time as why he did it, and one of the reasons I felt he had done it was to deflect. I don't think that was lost on the wider Rugby League public, by the way.
So next season, every Super League game is going to have a video referee. It's going to be available to be filmed. How much pressure does that put on the referees department? Because you're going to need a lot more match officials who, with experience or not, are going to have to be in the front line. Or do you bring back, I don't know, some recently retired referees, whoever they may be?
I could have a video referee, Phil. I was the worst video referee ever.
I got dropped from video referee in my last season, the last few weeks.
But are you going to have to expand that pool in a very short space of time? And is the resource there? Human resource.
So people always told me you needed more referees if you were having a video ref at every game, but the practical side of that is, at times last year we had 6 games video refereed at Magic and 6 games refereed, so we got through it for one weekend. We'd have some weekends where there were 3 games with a video referee. We got through those weekends. The other games, of course, used to have 2 in-goal judges. You no longer need those. I think it has an effect on the quality of the overall team of officiating, not the quantity, because I think you can manage to do that. I think there's some bigger challenges around recruitment of refereeing and retention. But if it's a bunker system and if it's all in a central location, actually you won't have to send a referee and a video referee to France for the weekend. That would help. That will mean you can do it all at the same place. We've ultimately got 9 full-time referees. They're all going to have to learn to be referees, touch judges, video referees, be multi-skilled, and I think with the exception probably of Ben, everyone else is a touch judge referee and a video referee. So upskill them, give them a go. Will there be some teething issues? I'm absolutely certain there will be, but
because we saw this week that you're not using the captain's challenge because there's uncertainty about whether some grounds will have screens and
that was came out this week, which was interesting. So that decision's not been made yet. That's a decision for the board to make. It was discussed at Lord's Committee, and some of those practical issues were put forward. And a bit of that is actually the real boring stuff of, do you have access to your own replays? What replays do you get? Do you get 8 cameras at every game? Do you get 6 cameras at other games? Is it fair to have it based on... If it's based on the old micron footage of 2 cameras, wide and narrow, and making a captain's challenge, it'll just be... What'll happen is you'll be going back every time saying, challenge unsuccessful, you keep your challenge, so all you'll end up doing is elongating games. So till we know what that looks like, they are the challenges. So the board will make that decision. I think it's part of the look. I'm pretending this is a big board meeting. It's huge. You know, there's so much going at this board meeting in the next week. We should expect it's the end of the year, and it's got to deliver stuff for next year. And but I personally, I wouldn't have brought captain's challenge in this year for those reasons. But the board might decide that they should do.